Aura from New Zealand, everybody. Today we're going to be going over lesson 14, process and narratives. Alright, so first I want to give you the definition of what process is. Process is a series of steps that we've carried out in a definite order. The easiest way to think about this is when you're telling someone how to do something or how to make something. We see this every day when we're looking at recipes. The big thing about this is that it requires a lot of organization. So you need to do that pre-writing and that outline, and you need to make sure you have very specific and particular word choices that you're using. We're going to build on what we've learned about description to work through process. The big thing here is that you want effective word choices. You need to be very precise when you're selecting them and be very appropriate for the purpose. While it's really great to be super descriptive for a recipe, you only need a certain amount of functionality when you're looking at a recipe. So what I want you guys to start off with, I know I haven't given you a lot, but I want you to start off with a little bit of practice on process. What I want you to do first is find a partner. And this is a really fun activity that I want you guys to enjoy going through. One of the two people in your group is going to put your back towards the smartboard, towards the screen. Okay? And the other one is going to look at the screen. The thing here is you have to pretend like you're writing a paper, which means it's one-way communication. You won't be able to communicate with your partner if your back is turned towards the screen. Both of you are going to have a turn at this opportunity when you're learning process. Alright, so I'm going to have you pause the video real quick while you situate yourselves into partners, and one partner puts their back to our screen. Alright, so what I would like you guys to do, you have a slide with potential drawings as well as some directions, but I'm just going to explain them to you and we're going to jump right into it. Each partner is going to have a different drawing that comes up on your screen, or on the screen. And you are, in the best way possible, going to describe to the partner who cannot see the picture how to draw that picture. The thing is, I don't want you to look at what they're drawing, because we can't do that when we're writing a recipe. We can't look at who's going to be using our recipe and see whether they actually do it correctly or not. It's a one-way street. So I don't want you to look at what your partner's drawing. I want you just to describe it as best you can. This means you need to be specific. Don't hesitate to use measurements and say something like, oh, it needs to take up a quarter of the page, or you need to turn your paper sideways, or it needs to be 1 inch big. Use those descriptive words and you're going to get the most accurate drawing possible. My challenge to you is to get the most accurate drawing possible of everything that is on the slide during your turn. Alright, so hopefully everybody's understood the directions. If you guys are ready, go ahead and move on with the slideshow and the recording. This first drawing, I want you to give, I want each person to have about 5 to 7 minutes or so. You can extend it longer if you need to. 5 to 7 minutes or so to do this activity. So I'd like you to pause the video while the first partner describes the picture on this first slide, picture 1. Once you've finished with your turn, you can turn around and look at what's up on the screen and see how accurate it was. And I'd like you to discuss with your partner kind of where they went wrong, what was unclear. Remember, it's a one-way street, so they don't know if they're describing it really well, but you can give them feedback so people can improve on their ability to write process. I would like you to complete the same thing with opposite partners, so the other person needs to put their back to the screen now, and we're going to complete the same activity with that second drawing. Alright, now that you guys have completed an activity and you know kind of about how much description you need and everything, I'm going to have you as a class pre-write and outline a potential process paragraph. And we have a practice slide right here. Pick a topic. It could be anything. A lot of people like choosing recipes. But I'd like you to choose something that everybody can pitch in on, and I want everyone to participate, figuring out the topic, and then I'd like you to list out the steps. The thing with pre-writing, the easiest thing for pre-writing is to do a list for this, because you can add numbers and change the order of steps. The order of steps in description is super important. If you think about it this way, if you're giving someone information or how-to on how to change their tire, it's not going to work out very well if you don't tell them they need to loosen the lug nuts before they try to take off the tire. They're going to end up very, very frustrated very quickly. So you need to make sure you're very particular about the steps that you put together. And so for the next few minutes, I would like you as a class to work together to write the pre-writing and the outline for a process paragraph. And you guys will be forwarding this to me, or I will get a copy so I can see what you did as a class. Moving on from process, next I'd like to talk to you guys about narration. This lecture is super short simply because process and narratives are two of the easiest concepts in English, simply because there's something that we do every day. You guys give people directions every single day, so process should be second nature. It's just a little bit harder when it comes to translating it down to writing. Narratives are kind of the same way. We all use narratives every day. We tell stories. If you are telling me why your homework is late, that's a narrative. That's a story. So I want you to think about some of the instances every day where you guys tell stories. Do you tell it to your spouses? Do you tell it to your kids? Think about these and think about ways that you can improve them. Think about ways that you might write them down, because remember, we don't always write how we speak. So then what I want you to think about is what makes a story a good story. Because there's plenty of bad stories out there, stories we don't like, narratives that are horrible. But I want you to think about what makes one a good story. And the way to do this, I want you guys to go around the room, and I'd like you to tell everybody what your favorite narrative is. A narrative can be a book, a television show, a movie, a poem, even an album or a song, anything that tells a story. So I want you to tell everybody what your favorite narrative or top couple narratives are, and I want you to tell me why. Is it the characters? Is it the way it makes you feel? Any number of things. The reason I want you guys to do this is sometimes the easiest way to get into good narrative writing is to emulate the narratives that we already like. Some of the most famous writers out there started out emulating their favorite authors until they found their own voice. And if that's something's going to help you along, I want you to do that. So I want you guys to go around the room. You can pause the recording and tell me what your favorite narrative is and why. So continuing on narrative essays, the entire point of a narrative essay or a narrative in general is to make some kind of point for your audience by telling a story. The easiest way to make a point is to have conflict. This might sound familiar from high school. There are 3 different types of conflict that we're going to focus on, and some of the best stories have all 3 types in them, but you need to have at least some kind of conflict to make the story flourish. There is one type of internal conflict. Internal means within. The internal conflict is man versus self. Alright, so this is, think about movies, maybe like Memento or Identity. These are narratives where the primary conflict is within somebody's own head. It's them versus themselves. It could be a psychological disorder. It could be a decision they need to make. That is internal conflict. On the other hand, there's 2 types of external conflict. External conflict can be man versus environment, which is exactly what it sounds like. The man versus maybe the elements. This is where we get a lot of apocalypse movies, like with tsunamis, or the big one right now is Sharknado, right? That's man versus environment, or the things around them. Sometimes you'll read a narrative that just has a single character and they're battling the elements to get home. That's what kind of conflict they have. The last type of external conflict is man versus man. Classically, this is superheroes. You have a protagonist, the good guy, and an antagonist, the bad guy, or the villain. That is man versus man. If you think back to some of your favorite narratives, they probably include all of these different conflicts, and that's what makes them really good narratives. So what I would like you guys to do is take a minute and pause the video, and I want you to read Superman and Me. It's on page 585. It's only a couple pages long. I'll just give you guys a few minutes while you pause this video to read over that narrative. So what I want you to think about when you're looking at this narrative. First, what is your purpose for reading? Your purpose isn't to just read because I told you to read. There's other reasons you read narratives. But it might be, it's the same as our writing purposes. Is it to inform, to persuade, to entertain? Is there multiple things? I want you to think about why you needed to read this article. So what was the author's intention with the purpose of this article? I want you to look at the title, Superman and Me. And I want you to see, what does it tell you about the text? What does it tell you about the author? It's really important to examine these things. We can't just examine the narrative as is. We have to look at these external factors in order to completely understand that. And I want you to know that as you go into writing your own narratives. I also want you to examine who the author is. It's really important. It's kind of, do you guys remember a couple weeks ago we watched that video about dictionaries and how we don't always look at who wrote the dictionaries, but we need to think critically and do that. We don't always think about who wrote our favorite narratives, and it's really important to look at our author in that way. If you're in the self-help section of Barnes and Noble and you're looking at understanding women or something like that, the narrative's going to be really different if it's written by a male versus if it's written by a female. So at the most basic level, you need to know who your author is and why you're reading it and what their take on it is going to be. If somebody's writing a travel guide and they're from, I don't know, Australia, they're going to have a lot more to say about Australia than someone who's maybe from Canada writing about Australia. So I want you guys to think about that as you go on and you talk about narratives. The last question I'd like you to examine is how the text is structured. This is really important, especially for longer works. I want you to examine the length of the chapters, how it's written, whether there's dialogue, whether there's not. A lot of the times it is all very, very intentional. If you have a bunch of tiny, short chapters, kind of like a soap opera, it's meant to move things along very quickly. If you don't have a lot of chapters and there's just these really long, drawn-out chapters, it's meant to move slowly. Everything in any narrative is super intentional, and I want you guys to work intentionally while you're writing. Don't just write to write necessarily, but you need to write with some kind of intention. You don't necessarily even need a moral to the story, but you need a point and a purpose. I told you this would be a super short lecture today. We covered process and narrative. If you have any questions, again, feel free to send me an email while I'm out. And don't worry about, you can ask the sub any questions. She's very helpful and she'll be able to help you guys out. Have a wonderful week. Bye.